Today is June 30th, 2011. My name is Tanya Finchum along with Juliana Nykolaiszyn. We're in Hugo, Oklahoma for a second afternoon with Mary Rawls, and this is regarding the circus community of Hugo, Oklahoma. So thank you for having us again today.
Well, you're more than welcome. Any way that I can remember, I'll help.
Well, when we were here before, you spoke about your father being a painter, painting windows.
Mm-hmm.
And then at one point you all decided to buy a house in Max Creek.
Yes, yeah. And here we bought that house sight unseen. And I think Dad was beginning to feel his age, and he was trying to get a home for us that wasn't on wheels before he passed. And so he bought this house, and it was all he bought it from was a picture. They had a picture of this house. Well, he put down $50 on it. I think we paid $650, and I had I think 5 acres of land that went with it. And when we got there to look at the house, it didn't resemble that picture at all. There was no driveway, there was no windows, the door was off of the thing, and so my dad pulled our vehicle over to the side of the road, and we had a vote. Because whenever there was a serious something to decide, we had to make a vote. Well, we got, Mama didn't want nothing anything to do with it. She said, no, I'm not going to live in there, I don't want that. And Corky, my brother Corky, the middle child, he was with Mom. And Dad and I were the only ones that really wanted to stay there and do something with that place. And Johnny hadn't made up his mind yet. And we were all badgering Johnny to come one side or the other. Finally, we got him on our side. So then the Dad and the boys got out, and with the shovel, they made a driveway. Because it didn't even have a driveway. It was a ditch like that, and you had to have a driveway to get it up in there. And we drove up there with our truck and trailer. And we went inside the house, and half the floor was gone. There was practically no floor. I swear it looked like pigs had been living. I mean, real pigs. So my mom just blew her mind away. But he said, well, this is it. We better do the best we can with it. Well, we had some furniture stored in Indianapolis, Indiana, where we had been living before in a house we rented. And so Dad and Corky took off to go and get our furniture. And Mom and Johnny and I were left there. It's out in the country. It's all dark woods. The nights are black as coal. And we were working in the house, a little repair, a little hammer and nails here and there. And then we would get ready to go up to our trailer to go to bed. And somewhere or other, my brother Johnny had a BB gun. So Mama's carrying the lantern, I'm in the middle, and Johnny's bringing up the rear with the BB gun in case any of the bad guys or the spooks come out of the woods to get us. The nights in Missouri at that time of the year are just as black as coal. You can't see 10 feet ahead of you. So that's the way we did. Well, the next thing we had to do, of course, was to build an outhouse. And that outhouse, I'll swear, it wasn't any wider than that. It looked like a telephone booth. Uh-oh. May I?
Yeah, sure.
Now, where were we?
Talking about the outhouse.
Yeah, well, we finally started hammering nails on that. And if you've ever tried to drive a nail into a green oak board, you have really picked yourself a chore. Because we're all out there. Mama's inside trying to do things inside. All the rest of us out there trying to nail up boards on this place. And Dad bought raw lumber that wasn't cured. And you really have to drive hard to get those nails into that thing. And then cover that with tar paper. And then those tarry things that are supposed to look like bricks, I think you've seen them before, covered with that. Well, we managed to do that. And finally, the house had... there was a there was a kitchen stove. There was a wood burning stove. My mother hated that stove. She could not get a fire going in that stove. And I never had any problem with it at all. She'd always call me, Mary, it's time to start the stove. So I had to learn how to chop wood out there and bring the wood in, put it in the stove and get the fire going. And then we started cutting down trees. And have you ever cut down a tree with a 2-man saw? Well, it ain't no fun. I believe you. My brother's on one side and I'm on the other. We're going like this. And I was naturally, by this time, I was dressing like a boy. And we were, that how we had the house just about pretty well, so it was livable. And I was out there one time chopping wood. I guess I'm about 15 or 16 years old, maybe a little older. And this old man comes up out of the woods. He lived way down in the gully. And he come up there and he started talking to my dad. And he saw me chopping wood and building up for the fireplace. And he said to my dad, says, if you'd like to get shed of that girl, I'll take her. My dad laughed. He said, no, don't think I can let it go of her just yet. He talked in the same kind of lingo that the man did. And we got real acquainted with some people up on the hill that run a gas station. And the big deal was to get to go up to Lily's place. And we'd walk up there sometimes. And there was a man two houses down from us. And he had a cow. And he milked a cow and made his own butter. So my father was regressing because he was what time he had it at home, he was raised in a farm. His grandmother raised him. And he says he's going to get a churn so my mother can churn butter. Well, that didn't go over very well with my mother because she's out here with this thing, change. We never did get any butter out of that thing. And finally he said, well, we're going to have a horse in order to bring these logs up from the backwoods where we were cutting down these trees and so forth. He went on well, they had a flea market kind of a sale. It wasn't quite the same as it is nowadays, but he bought an old nag, a blind-eyed old horse up there. And we're trying to play farmer, and then not one of us knew anything about playing farmer. And my mother was more and more disgusted all the time. But we stayed there until spring, and then we got a date to go to play fairs. So we hit the road and went playing fairs. And they used to have the big circle, the racetrack, and then they had the infield, and then there was this huge grandstand on the other side. Well, they had performers there. In between races, they would have an act. And then at 7 o'clock in the evening, they'd have an entire program. But it was a pain in the neck because a lot of these were sulky races. Have you ever seen a sulky race? Oh, boy. They are fun, but they are a pain because they got these horses all alive with their little sulkies, and they start counting from, there's a big tall house up on blocks up here, and they're watching it down, and the horses have all got to start at the same time. And one of them starts out ahead, that's a failure, bring him back. And you're waiting in your costume and wardrobe out in the boiling sun for them to go ahead and do their thing around there so you can get your act on and over with. And that's part of playing fairs. Well, we went out to Nebraska and Kansas with the fair days. There were a lot of fairs out there. And I'm doing a tight wire act with an umbrella, and here comes that western wind, and it blows your umbrella all the way off into the infield, and you're out of luck with your umbrella. So I was glad when the fair season was over. But we spent a number of years on the fair season, and in between times, of course, we've showed in vaudeville, we've showed in nightclubs, and then circuses. When we weren't too much on a circus when we were small, but Dad got us a job with the Buck Owens show, and we went down there. That's where I met Harry. But before that, we were out in Kansas, and we were with Bud Anderson's All American Wild West. And that's I think I showed you that picture of Big Chief Keys and his old battle axe. That's when I met them. And I met this Chuck Fuller, and his mother played the organ. His father was a clown, and he was a clown. And we dated a little bit, but it didn't amount to anything. I couldn't. Every time they got too serious, I said, "I'm sorry, I'm not into it just yet." So from there, we come back here. We finally come back to Hugo. We pulled into the trail. We had gotten a job with Herb Walters, with his Cole and Walters Circus, and we stayed there for several years. But that's after Harry and I met. We got married and we had a kid or two by that time. And the first year out, Johnny had just gotten out of the service. He was in the Green Berets, and he did a trampoline act. Well, it was a homemade trampoline, and the first act out there, there was a girl in another act that Johnny talked her into being his partner on the trampoline. Well, the first show out there, the trampoline broke down. I mean, it just fell all apart and Johnny was a good trampolinist. But the very next morning, we're on the lot, and here comes Herb, walking across the road with a real determined look on his wife's name, Dorothy. And Harry looked out the window and said, I know what he's coming to. He's going to fire us right now. So Harry made a beeline out there and talked to him and said, Herb, just give us a week. Give us a week. We'll get it straightened out. And of course, by that time, I had just had a baby, and I was still kind of swollen, and their swinging ladders were narrow. And I wasn't very narrow. I went to go through the ladder to come out on the other side of my hand flange, and I couldn't get through. I had to back out and go around the ladder, and that was the most embarrassing thing in my whole life. But finally, as the swelling went down, I got rid of that. So we spent, I guess, about 3 years with Herb Walters. And that's when we parked out here at the fairgrounds, and all the other show people parked out there too. And we had a sad thing out there. There was a guy. They used to the tents were all canvas, and in the rain they would leak terrible. So they would take and coat them with paraffin before the season started. And this man that was doing that, it wasn't Herb's show, it was another show, and he was out there, and they heat the paraffin up over like a campfire until it's boiling hot, and then they sweep it onto the canvas with a broom. Well, this guy somehow managed to tip that paraffin over, and it killed him. And nowadays you don't have to do that. You got your plastic tents, and you don't have to do that. But another thing that happened on Herb's show, he had a son-in-law. His what the heck was his name? Anyhow, she was the boss's daughter, and he married Charlie. And we had the tent spread, and it was raining like a son of a gun, and they will belly out and hold the water in the tent. And if you don't get rid of that water, it'll pull the stakes up and knock it down. So Harry goes in, and he gets he got a gun, a powerful weapon evidently, and he pulls it up there and shoots. He's going to put it, just a little bullet hole in it. He blew the whole tent apart, all the water come down on the big top. He never did live that down. And I think I've got that covered, but I can't get it into sequence because I have these pictures like movies in my mind, but to put dates on them or times and so forth, it eludes me. It's so long ago. And most of this has happened since I had my heart operation. I don't remember as well. They just had me so sedated. It took me 3 months to get over with the sedation.
Well, did your parents keep the house at Max Creek for very long?
No. When Dad passed away, Mama never did like the place anyway, and so we just held on to it for a long time, and finally somebody was willing to buy. We put it up for sale, and the real estate man that we traded there in the first place, he sold it, and we all had. It was divided out in parts. My dad did some for Johnny and some for Corky and some for myself and so on. But we all just agreed to go ahead and sell it.
Why had he picked there to begin with? I mean, why
The
there?
Lord only knows. I think he wanted to hide from the public and hide from the world and everything else. He wanted to have his family right there, and he didn't want to be bothered by anybody. And he was the only one that felt that way. And I had, when I got pregnant with David, why we went back there, and he was born in, oh god darn, what? There's a big town just east and south of where Max Creek was, and that's the only place that was a hospital. And the day that we had just gotten back off of a fair route, and I started having labor pains, and Harry was out with my dad painting signs because it hadn't been a good season. We needed every dime we could get, and we were pretty well broke. So Mama took me to the hospital, and David was born there. And of course, we couldn't pay the bill. We didn't have money to pay the bill. You could have a baby for $50 in those days, but we didn't have $50. So Harry was raised in this school down here in Circus, Arkansas, boys' school run by Catholic priests. And so he wrote to one of them, and he got $50 to pay the bill at the hospital, and I could come home. But bad thing happened to me in that hospital because there was, I had stitches. I had torn up pretty good at the birth. And so instead of they have a heat lamp that they're supposed to put on you to bake those stitches. Well, the nurse didn't have access to the heat lamp, so she took off my bed lamp that was hooked to the back of the table, and it got really, really hot, and it fell on my stitches. So I was really kind of incapacitated for quite a little while till that all mended. Well, Mama come and got me and brought me home, and sitting there, and all the boys want to see what the baby looks like and this, that, and the other. And just about the time I'm ready to unwrap the baby and show it off, we get a telephone call. The hospital's called us. We brought home the wrong baby. They gave us the wrong baby. And I opened up, and of course, I was breastfeeding. I'd already fed the baby, and he was a bottle baby. And I thought, gee, if I ever had a chance to sue anybody, that was wide open. But we didn't think about suing people for something like that in those days. Besides, that takes a lot of money to sue somebody anyway. So the nurse from the hospital made a mad dash over with that baby and traded me for the baby I had, and took that. And they never told the mother what happened. The mother of the other baby, they never told her. I heard later that by the time that little boy was 6 or 7 years old, she heard it somehow or other, and she was suing the hospital. I never did find out how that went. But David was almost something else. and my David, because the other baby's name was David too. And my David had reddish blonde hair. Not very much of it, but some. And the other baby had dark hair. So when they called me and they said, "You've got the wrong baby," I started unwrapping the baby, because all I did was uncover its face, so the boys could see what their nephew looked like. And said, "This baby's got dark hair." And that's what, after the phone call. So that was quite an experience. In fact, and our telephone was on, there was 8 people. It was a what do you call it?
Party line.
Party line, right. And there was 8 people on there, and because we were circus people and the phenomenon of the whole neighborhood, every time our phone rang, everybody on the line, click, 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 click. And they all knew about the change of the baby and so forth. And we had 2 shows called up to hire us. We had one up in New York, it was Jimmy Cole, and one down in Florida. And we were answering the phone when we went up to Lily's house at the gas station. The grocery store says, "Well, which one you going? You're going to Arkansas, or you're going to go to not Arkansas, Florida or New York?" And we were both dumbfounded because we didn't realize, that everybody was listening in. So that that was our period there. We were going to be farmers. Ha ha ha.
Did they even have time to put in a garden? Not with
My dad went and brought a whole bunch of strawberries. He was going to have strawberries up there, and he got this whole field cleared out, and he's going to plant strawberries. That didn't turn out very well because we got a day to go on the road. Well, who's going to watch the strawberries? No, we didn't get anything. But years later, Harry and I went back there went through there to visit because we were showing in another town just beyond Max Creek. And we stopped there, and some guy had bought the property. He built a really nice house. He had a nice garden. He was planting trees and everything. And we just asked him if we could come up and look around, told him we used to live there and so forth. He was very friendly and nice, but he was doing a lot more with that property than what we were able to do. Let's see, what else? Where do we go from here?
Well, once you had David, how soon did you go back to performing? And what month was David born in?
Winter babies.
Was he a winter baby?
Yeah, he must have been because we were off the road. Isn't that awful? He just had a birthday not too long ago. See, these are sort of things. Now, 10 minutes after you've gone, I'll remember every bit of it.
Well, if he's a winter, then you would be performing again by the time the show came out.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. And by the time I had 3 kids, I had David, Bobby, and Margie had just been born. And we got down to Florida, and the kids and I are sitting there. And I was telling Bobby, who's just a little guy then, just barely able to talk, and we drove up on our truck on the end of the winter quarters and so on. And I was telling him all about the elephant. Of course, we call them bulls. And said we're going to see the bulls. And we drove up in there, and Bobby's all big eyed, like, bulls, bulls. That's about all he could say was bulls. But Harry had gone in to see the boss, and then he come back to the truck, very, very sober face, very stern looking. I said, "Oh boy, we didn't get the job." So I said, "What's the matter? We didn't get the job." And he said, Just be quiet. Just be quiet." And he drove us up to the city park and parked there. And he told the kids to go out and play in the park. And he told me that the word he got that my dad had died. And I didn't have the money to go home, but he borrowed again for money for me to take the train and go home to my dad's funeral. And at that time it snowed something terrible, and you couldn't get through to Max Creek, to the area we lived in. And Johnny, my brother Johnny, came and drove over and drove me to the house. And they weren't going to let him through because the roads were blocked off, the ice and the snow and everything. And he told me, he said, "I've got to get through. My dad just died. We've got to go there to the funeral." So they let us through. They took the roadblock down and let us go by. And that's, about all I can really remember of the funeral is that we had attended one of our friends at their Max Street, not show people, their funeral, because we've been very friends with them and all, and their father died. And we went to the funeral, and the priest he wasn't a Catholic priest, he was a Protestant priest of some kind, and he went on and on and on. And the poor mother and the 2 daughters were just crying their heads off. And that, I didn't think that preacher was ever going to shut up. And so my brother Corky, who at that time was still in uniform, he got a hold of the Catholic priest that was in there in Camden, and he says, "Now look," so we're going to bury my dad. I don't want a long speech or anything like that. I just keep it brief. It's bad enough and so the poor priest was terrified of, because Corky was a big husky guy, And so the poor Frazier, he did the best he could with the limited amount of what he could do. And then that was right at the graveside. It wasn't in the church. My father wasn't Catholic, but my mother was. So that's how he got buried. There's such a wealth of memories, and they all get mingled in your mind sometimes.
We were doing fine, though.
Well, what's the next question?
Well, while you were up on the wire performing,
Mm-hmm.
would you be thinking about anything in particular? Or were you just focusing on keeping the next step in line?
Oh, I wasn't focusing on the step, but I was focusing on the audience. Here I am. Like me. Smile. You know, I'm a princess. I'm on the typewriter. Everybody's looking at me. What else can you? I mean, that's part of it. No, you're not thinking about where you're stepping and then, because that all becomes just automatic habit. You know, like driving a car, you know exactly what to do because you drive all the time. You don't think about it, you just do it. And that's the way it was with that.
Well, would you focus on anyone in particular in the crowd? Or
I focused one time on the whole crowd because part of my act, I had a beautiful white evening gown with a flowing skirt and all that, and I always made my entrance in that kind of an outfit. Well, we're playing schools up in New York for Jimmy Cole, and they announced me, and I step out there, and I've got a tiara on, and all these girls in the audience, most of them are high school students, thinking, oh, like that, and it froze me for a second. For a split second, I was just frozen because, hey, they mean me. And then I get up on the wire and I do the waltz in the gown and so forth, and then coming back, then the gown had special snaps so you could just yank it this way and it'd all fall off of you, and you were in your short costume that you could actually do your work in. But that, I've never forgotten that moment because that was a great moment.
I just wondered if every crowd was the same.
Well, yeah, for the most part, because in those days, TV wasn't as popular as it is now, and they didn't have the movies, or the CDs, or anything like that. So that kind of live entertainment was really appreciated, and you get good crowds. And we would play a series of schools up in New York for Jimmy Cole in the wintertime, and then we go on the road for the show or fairs in the summertime. But I don't know, the audience enjoyed what you do it so much, and that gives you a good feeling. Hey, they're really happy. They like this. You got a clown who goes out there. He's a tramp clown. He comes out there and he stumbles over his foot and he falls on your nose, and everybody laughs like, he's happy. He's happy. He's making people happy. And that probably sounds a little phony, but for me, that's the way it was. And I did my Spanish web, and I'd come out in a black velvet cape, and I would take and swirl around and put my feathers out and take the cape off and then climb the web up and come down, and I'd get a big hand. Everybody's giving me a big hand. It's a great feeling. You just can't believe the feeling you get because I don't know, they're happy. They're happy, and that makes me happy too.
Was there much difference between the afternoon performance and the evening performance? Would you do the same?
On the big top, or no, it was the same. there wasn't a change unless somebody got sick or something like that. There was no change. It went on ding 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 just like that. And so you knew when your time came. If you knew by the music. If it was the Liberty Act, well, you know, okay, I got 2 acts to go. I can change the diaper before I can go. And you got the Liberty Act, you got the Bull Act. By the music, you know, the Roman rings come on. You know when that, you know whatever act is on in the big top, but from your trailer because of the music. Because everybody has their own particular type of music. If it's a speed up kind of a day or a waltzing thing, you know what it is.
So you didn't have to stay within the tent itself while the show was going on?
Oh no, it was a bad thing to hang around by that back door in your wardrobe. I mean, unless the back doors were closed. A lot of people, you know, if they close, you know, there's curtains that close the back doors, but they're big curtains because they've got to have room for the elephants to go in. And you can stand around there and talk, but you better not be right in that back door. You're going to be in trouble. That's a no-no. But the act that's in there deserve that courtesy too, because the audience is supposed to be watching the acts go on. They don't want to watch people stand and run around in costumes in the back door. So, no, you had your rules, but everybody just seemed to automatically know what the rules were, and so you didn't worry about it.
Well, would you ever stop and watch the whole performance yourself? What if your kids were well taken care of somewhere else? Would you just stay in and watch the whole thing?
No, because I was always in most of it, one way or the other. I did swinging ladder, I did web, I did loop the loop, I did cloud swing. So I would be in and out of there several times. You've got to change costumes for each one, so you really don't have time for that.
And you changing your trailer, or was there a change in tent?
Oh no, in your own trailer. No, because I'm talking about small shows. Now, I'm not talking about Ringling Brothers or anything like that. I never was on any of those, thank goodness. But I don't know. The circus life it's hard to describe, and it must seem weird to town people, but you become a whole family. And it's like living in a real small town where you know all of your neighbors. And you're almost cloistered in a way. And of course your performers all gather in the backyard. And I think I explained that to you before. There was different groups, the working men and the front door people and the sideshow people, and then there's the performers in the big top. And we used to, shows used to start. The matinee was always at 2:00, and the night show was always at 8:00. They changed that drastically later on, but after the night show was over, everybody would take turns having kind of a little picnic at their trailer, and it would take turns. Somebody would have the food, this one, and the next one, and the next one, and so forth. And you just sit there and chew the rag and get, talk about old times and what and what for and so on.
Relax a little bit.
Yeah, just laugh it up. Anything else?
Were most of your friends associated with the circus, or were they town people, or a little bit of both?
Well, in the earlier years, it was the circus people because you were an oddity to town people, and they viewed you with a little bit of either fear or skepticism, or sometimes just despised you altogether. And because, when most people had a house in a town or a city, and they lived there all the time, and they knew all their neighbors, and here comes all these gypsy-like people following a tent and performing, and so you get cloistered. You get cloistered. And that's one of the things that I like so much about Hugo. When we came to Hugo, we were welcome. I mean, this was a great town for all of us, all the show people all together. And there's been, at one time or another, there's been over 45 circuses wintered here because they were welcome. And they found out that we weren't going to steal them blind. We weren't going to ignore them and so forth. And we managed to circulate. And when they found out, we went to church and ate alpha plates like they did, that sort of thing. Because they had, anybody who was footloose and fancy-free was a vagabond, and not trustworthy. They were afraid of you. And they didn't mind coming and watching your circus, but they didn't want nothing to do with you personally. And if you look back, you can understand that, because there were some shows that had, how can I put it without, there are people that had bad people on a circus, just like there's bad people on a town. And they go in and they may steal something, or that sort of thing, and the people were afraid of us because we were vagabonds. And actually, we were vagabonds, but not the kind that they thought. So, I don't know.
Well, since you've retired, do you consider yourself a townie, or more, or how do you refer to yourself?
I have found it rather difficult, I have to admit, and more so after my husband passed away. We were rather active in the town. We used to have a Kiwanis club here, and I worked at the Kiwanis club. I was in the ladies' church societies, and Harry became president of the Lions Club. I became president of the Kiwanis Club, but I had to resign because coming out on the road in the summertime, there was nobody there to be the Kiwanis Club. So I said, you need to get a president that can be here all the time. Well, they accepted that just fine, so I could come and be in the Kiwanis Club when I was home in the wintertime. And the whole town accepted us. I mean, the first guy I think that had a circus here used to run what was the name of that grocery store? Starts with a P. It was a chain of groceries, and he owned one right down here on the corner. I don't know if you've been down that way or not, but it sits on the corner. It's a trading place now. But he used to have a big grocery store there. I can't remember the name of that
The
grocery
only
store.
P I can think of is Piggly Wiggly. That's probably not it.
No, it's not. But anyhow, he had money, and he had money, and he bankrolled in the circus. There was another one. It was a dentist here. I think his son's still a dentist. He had an office uptown, and he liked the circus, and so he was a backer. Provided some money to get you open and so on. And it just went from one thing to the other. To the circuses generally found that this was a good town that would accept them. And no, if I could turn the clock back, I'd do it all over again with joy. But time marches on.
Well, let's talk a little bit about when you moved from the trailer into the first house here in Hugo as a married family with children. What that was like.
Well, our first house was over on North G Street. And we paid $3,500 for it. Took us a year or two to pay it off because we had to pay it in payments. And as I look back now, it really wasn't much of a house, but I thought it was a castle. A house with running water, because we carried a water and milk can. The kids had to go to the water wagon and fill up our milk can to have water in the house. And I just thought it was great because we had a living room and we had a bedroom for all the kids. They had to be stacked high, but they were all the kids, and a bedroom for us, and had a dining room and it had a kitchen. And then you have no idea how much that kind of space means. And the kids were only a few blocks from the school that they had to attend. So that's when the fourth ward school. And so it was nice for us. And of course we would still be on the road and go out in the summertime. And there was a real nice lady that lived over on the corner, and she would look after our house. I mean, not go in, and she'd just call us if there's anything bad going on about the house. But took us a long time to pay for that house. We lived there, gosh, how long? Quite a while. Let's see, who was born there? I think I had the last two kids from that house. Yeah.
I would imagine it would feel like you have a whole lot more space.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And you had privacy, too. Midge, in a trailer, you'll have, up the front end over the hitch, you'll have a sofa. And you'll have the door. And you may, if it's big enough, you may have a little table that comes out. But other than that, the next place, you've got your kitchen stove and your sink, and you've got your breakfast nook over here. And then in the back of the trailer, you've got the double bed. Well, sometimes the double bed has got to be made into a bed big enough for all the kids, so you're sleeping in the little kitchen area. It turns it around, makes the bed. But as you get more kids, then you get the back room to yourself, and you put the kids in the breakfast nook, because it all collapsed down, and you put mattresses in there, and then you put a big board in between so that they're like in a bassinet or a big bedroom. That Bobby John, you put him to bed, and he didn't like to be touched. So he'd start, meow, what's the matter? What's the matter, Bill? What's the matter, Bobby? He's touching me. Well, naturally, when there's 4 of them in there, somebody's going to be touching somebody. But he'd have a fit about that. But as time went on, we got, they were 28-foot trailers then. I can remember one, the roofs used to be plastic. The sides were vinyl, they call it now. And the roof was canvas. And we got into a windstorm one time, and they blew the roof off of the thing. And you can't stop and get it fixed, because in the first place you can't afford it, so you got to fix it yourself. So Harry and I were repairing the roof. We bought rolls of canvas, and we do a little bit each day. Roll up the canvas, patch the roof, and go on to the next town. And roll up a little more canvas and patch the roof and go on to the next town. And then we have to coat it with stuff to make it waterproof. Well, that was no easy thing to do either, because you didn't have time enough on a show to get the whole job done. So you do part of it, and you do part the next time. And that trailer was a Zimmer. That was the first trailer that we had. Took us forever to pay for it. And Lily up at the grocery store loaned us the money to get the trailer. We had to have a down payment of $200, and Dad went to the bank in Max Creek, and then he went to the bank in Camden, then turned him down. No luck. We had, nothing. You didn't have any kind of property that you owned or nothing like that. So Lily said, well, I'll tell you what, because we got to be real good friends with her. And she said, I'll give you the $200, because we had a date on a show, and we were headed out there, and we didn't have a place to live. Because when Harry and I got married, my dad had an old truck with a Celotex body on the back. And my dad was not happy even that I was getting married. He was losing the girl in the act. So he built us a box on the back of this truck. He tore it all apart, and then on the frame behind the cab, he built this box, which was going to be our living quarters as we were married. And he put 2 single beds in it. And I'm talking about single beds, and certainly not room for 2. And I think he did that out of spite. But we lived in that for a long time. You had to have the homemade wooden steps to climb up into the thing. But it was when we got that Zimmer trailer. That was another case that I was really thrilled, moving that cracker box on wheels to a Zimmer trailer. And Zimmer was a nice trailer in those days. I thought it was just great. And of course, when Willie came to live with us too, it wasn't quite so great, because he talked and he talked and he talked all the time. And if you didn't listen, he'd poke you. He said, did you hear that? Did you hear what I said? And he had these tales he was telling you that you could care less about. He would ramble on and on and on and on. And he had diabetes, and he was a drinker. And I told Harry, I said, this isn't going to work. I said, he's drinking too much. So finally I put him on a diet. And he worked the novelty stand at that time while I was still a performer. And he'd come to the trailer after the tear down, when the show was tearing down. And I'd stop him at the door of the trailer, and I would grab all of his money away from him. because if I didn't, he'd drink. And one night he came in, and I had to search his hatband, his pockets, and everything to make sure I got the money. Well, he came in this one night, and I said, "Is this it? Is that all?" Oh. I said, "You got any more money any place?" He had $3 silver stuck underneath his tongue in his mouth. And, you know, there's always some guy on the show that will sell whiskey. And so I took that out of his mouth and put it away for him. I didn't keep it myself, but I put it away for him. And then I drove the car, and Harry drove the truck and trailer. And Willie was getting the car with me, and I had the kids in the back seat. And what the heck? Oh yeah, I was looking for a map, and I went for a map, and he had a bottle hidden in the glove compartment. I took the bottle, and I unlocked it, and I poured it all out the window like that. They said, "You're Mrs. Smart. You think you're Mrs. Smart. That was a smart thing to do. You're Mrs. Smart." And he kept mumbling that all the way to the next town. I ditched the whiskey. But he wore size 58 trousers, and I took him down to a size 34 by keeping him on a diet. And he didn't have near as much trouble with his asthma or anything, and his diabetes. So, one way or another, I won that battle.
And we have to say, Willie was your father-in-law?
He is my husband's stepfather.
Stepfather, okay.
And of course, he had no place to go except, and he and Harry were always together. And so, after we'd been married a while, I fell over to him. And Willie was a good soul. He was a good soul. He just had this problem. And he was nuts about the kids. He just loved the kids. So, you know, he put up with it.
Well, as you traveled from city to city, did you remember much about the town you were just in? Or were you just passing through?
Well, no, not really, because you come in and you know about the arrows that get you there, okay? You follow the arrows to the lot. You're on the lot, you set up. You may have gone to the grocery store, or you may have gone to the laundromat. But other than that, you don't see much of the town. You get up and do your stuff and tear down the next day, and you go on to the next town. So you don't really get that acquainted in the town. Occasionally, somebody will come along that is not afraid to death of you, and will start a visit, you know, and become a kind of a friend. But there wasn't much letter writing or that sort of thing. I mean, you're here today, gone tomorrow, so what's the use?
I just wondered if you got used to the geography, like learning which cities were where and what the geography would be.
In a fashion you do, but like I say, with me, my memory is so bad. I mean, we used to go to New York every winter because Jimmy Cole was a wintertime show, and he booked all these high schools where they did performances there. And other than that, like, you didn't really pay attention. One town was just like another after all. A lot had to do with how nice the people were. Some were good and some were not so good. So, but it didn't really stick in your head very much.
So you really didn't have a favorite venue that you played for then?
You mean a route?
Yeah.
Well, you don't want to repeat the same towns over and over again. Now you may play a series of towns this year, and then maybe the year after, 2 years down the road, you might play those same towns again. But it's a might. It all depends on what your agents can book.
Well, when it comes to picking a partner to be married to, is it easier if they come from a circus family too, or not?
Well, that's a strange story too, because we were showing in fairs, and I met this farmer. I think I told you about him before, and I was sort of engaged to him when we went down to Sebring, Florida, to join the Buck Owens show, and that's where I met Harry. Well, I didn't think too much of it because I was still kind of enamored of the guy in Nebraska. And he finally come around. Evidently, he liked me, but he was very bashful. Oh, he was so bashful. And he'd finally come over and ask if I would go to church with him. Well, I found out he was a Catholic. I said, well, yeah, I'll go to church with you. So we went to midnight mass. That was our first date. And then I think I told you also about the date at the Soda Pop nightclub. They don't sell no whiskey, but if you brought your own, that was no problem with theirs. And we got out there and got the Coca-Cola sitting down in the chair, and the music is going, and I'm ready to go dancing. And he said, I forgot to tell you, I don't know how to dance. So I danced the whole evening with his friend instead of him. She sewed off because he brought a girl too. And we just became friends. I mean, there was no sweetheart thing about it. We just became friends. And then he came and asked my dad if I could work in his whip act, holding the papers. Dad looked at him and kind of studied him. And Harry was face Dad. And he said, well, if you promise not to hit her, I'll let her try it. So I began holding papers for him in the West. The Jeb Bucko in the show was half circus and half Wild West. And he worked in Wild West. He was a rope spinner, and he was a whip cracker, and he did the trick riding and so forth. And so he let me work in his act. Well, we went out, where did we go? He took me out to breakfast one time, and we walked downtown and had breakfast. And of course, we were all stone broke. My folks were broke. The whole show was broke, and didn't think he had any money, so I ordered real cheap. He orders ham and eggs and everything else like that. So, I made a mistake here. I should have ordered what I wanted. But anyhow, he brought me back to my trailer, because we used to just walk around town, just walking. And he brought me back to my trailer, and I was at the step of my trailer door, and he says, can I kiss you goodnight? I said, oh, okay. So he goes, like that. And I looked at him, I said, you call that a kiss? And I took a hold of his hand and dragged him around behind the trailer, and boy, I laid a smacker on him right there. He ran all the way home. And from then on, I guess we were destined to be what we became. He was cute. There's a picture of him there. That's when he was older, of course.
I would think it would be easier for a marriage to work if both came from a circus.
Yeah, and
background.
the other clincher was that we were both of the same church.
That's true.
Oh, excuse me. Oh, I didn't realize that was here. I'm sneezing right into your microphone.
Oh, it's okay. We can edit that out.
That's okay. That's about all I have. And I wanted to clear up too.
Oh.
Anything else? Anything else you want to say before we say goodbye again? Say we got her choked up.
I can't think of anything right offhand. I have got zillions of remember the album that I showed you before? I've got one of those big plastic tubs like this, about that deep, that's filled with albums with all kinds of circus people in them. But I didn't bring it out because I didn't know if you were into that. But there's so many people in there, and when I see their picture, then I know.
Mm-hmm.
But to bring them out of my head is another story altogether.
Did you ever have to help in the cookhouse?
I was the cook. We had one time the cook blew the scene, or he got fired, and I had he blew the scene. I had to do the cooking and this was on the Clyde Beatty Cole Brothers show, and I cooked for 2 weeks, and then I did all right. They seemed to like the food okay. They said I was a lot cleaner than the previous cook.
Well, did you get to pick the menu, or was it chosen for you?
Well, it's pretty much chosen for you because it's got to be the kind of food that's available in the town you're in, and it has to be something that you can cook up ahead and keep hot and so on, and so it's it's not like fried chicken or anything like that. It's a big pot of this or a big pot of that and so on. So it's you've got things that you need. Well, there's somebody that does the buying for the cookhouse. The cook doesn't do it. The cook makes the list, and somebody else does the buying. And did that for a couple of weeks there. And I also did that on, see, what was the other show? I did it for a short while on another show. And I've also run the hot dog stand or the pie car. And after I got to the point where I wasn't in the show itself, I ran the novelty stand. I just learned how to get on Facebook. I'm not real thrilled with my ability on the computer, but I had two guys on there. One was Dave Donahue, and he come on this Facebook, you know how it says to be my friend and so forth, and I thought, who the Sam Hill is Dave Donahue? Well, I didn't know him because when he was on the show with me, his name was Kilowatt. He was the electricity man. He's the one that plugged all the trailers into electricity, and he set the electricity all off from the generators and so forth. And if somebody hadn't told me it was Kilowatt, I would have never have known the guy, who it was. And he put a picture up there, and he didn't look anything like he used to. And there was another one I had on my novelty stand. Oh, I used to get so mad at him. He was tall, and he was skinny, he had long black hair. He thought he was God's gift to women, and he had absolutely no qualms about anything. We'd hit the lot, and he'd go to a house across the street or near the lot and ask them if he could come in and take a bath. He'd go in and take a shower. And surprisingly, he was often invited in where he could take a shower. And then when it come time to put that darn novelty stand up, which I had to do by myself, and drove the stakes and I put the tent up, he was supposed to be there to help me. Well, he never showed up till the last stake was driven. And then come showtime, you got to get it all ready in the morning. Come showtime, you've got to be out there when the crowd starts coming in if you're going to do any business. Because you got to pitch all your stuff ahead of time. They don't buy it then, but you got to pitch it then. And then they go into the big top, and the kid mama said, "That's all right, I'll get you one when we come out." And you got to build that up. And Ricky was never there. He was always late because he was my inside butcher. He had to carry the toys in at the big top and wave them around underneath the kids' nose and so forth. But he was always late. And I just got him on Facebook, and he put his picture up there. I didn't recognize the picture at all, but his tagline was "Monkeys on a Stick." Well, now nobody but somebody like Ricky would remember that, because we had the little fur monkeys on a bamboo cane and so forth. Well, you can't even get those anymore. They don't make them anymore. They don't ship them anymore. But when he said "monkeys on a stick," oh, for crying out loud, that's Ricky. And he was tall, skinny, and this long black hair. He looked like one of those, what do they call them in those days? The ones who were all protesting against everything in the United States.
A hippie.
Hippie, exactly, hippie. And now he's round face, moon face, a little heavier weight and so forth, and he wants to be my friend. and he's Dave Donahue, the Kilowatt. He's going to be here in August. He got married. He sent a picture of him and his bride, and he wanted to know if he'd come and visit. And I said, "Well, I'm sure. Come on over. I'll be glad to see you." but I'm not very good on the computer at all. I get lost on it sometimes and can't get out of it and get back.
Sounds like you're doing pretty good though to get that far.
Well, and all my kids are on it, and that's the way. So because I used to just email, and then they kept saying, "Why don't you get on Facebook?" Well, I'm a private person, and I'm not too sure about getting my face out there on that computer and so on. So I hesitated a long time, but they finally got me on Facebook because I got, let's see, Margie and Bobby and Chris and Mike all live over in Durant. And so I kept in contact with them that way. And I've got all the kids. And of course, it's funny because when Harry and I were married, I didn't really have the freedom and the opportunity to make too many close friends in town. I have some from my church now. We have a meeting that goes on at the basement of what's that church down there on the corner on 2nd Street. Anyway, it's called Support Group. And it's for widows and widowers to come and be a part of it where somebody else knows what they're going through and so on. But
You're fine.
anyway, and I became a part of that, and I have made many friends from the Catholic Church. I've gotten very closed in since my husband passed, because we went everywhere together. When we did the thing, we did it together. And it's kind of hard for me to go out and do things by myself. I just feel sort of lost. So, and I'm so. It was hard at first, but I'm content with David made me this little house, and I'm very happy with the house. And I know he's right next door if I really need him or something. So, I'm content. I'm content.